We hope you enjoy this podcast. All our conversations are inspired by films we have selected to appear on SDG.vision. So go and take a look and be inspired by people and organisations who are making valuable contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals and making our world a better place for everybody to live. Now, sit back, enjoy, be inspired, and afterwards, go and take action.
Well, hello and welcome to the SDG Vision podcast. I'm Pierre Jones, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Roberts from Groundwork North East Cumbria. Hello, Steve.
Afternoon, Pierre. You well?
Yeah, very well, actually. Although it's a bit nippy down here, down south in the south of England. I'm not sure how it is up north.
It's always brighter up north.
There we go, folks. I'm sure that's true. Well, look, thank you for joining us. We've been aware of Groundworks work for a while now, and we featured one of your films, which was called Floating Ecosystems Were a Stepping Stone to a New Career, Josh's story, and we've got that under SDG 14. So first off, we really recommend people having a look at that after this, watching this interview. And we thought, well, it would be really good to get Groundwork on because we see a lot of similarities in Groundwork's approach to the Sustainable Development Goals. So perhaps, Steve, it would be good to kick off with just a little explanation or description of what Groundwork is and what it does.
That's probably the scariest question I could be asked.
Because you do so much, I take it.
Yeah, well, I've been in Groundwork 24 years and I still haven't managed to kind of, decant it all down into an elevator pitch. I've had many attempts at this, so I'll give it another go. I think one of the first things I would say is that we are probably one of the largest unknown charities in the country. I remember some research done probably over a decade ago, and I think we featured beyond 100th in terms of recognition. But that's actually part of maybe our secret sauce in there. I think, how to describe it? In a nutshell, social and environmental work. This is a combination of both what the intersect between these two. So we're not an overtly environmental charity, and we're not overtly a social charity. But we have a broad spectrum of activity that really uses, the environment, but with a people-first approach in this. It covers a whole multitude of types of activities, from youth work, employment work, landscape design and build, health and well-being, energy advice, nature-based solutions. In effect, it kind of goes on in this. For Groundwork North East Cumbria, what we are is we are an independent groundwork trust, but we're part of a wider federation of groundwork trusts across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. So we cover the whole area, and all of the groundwork trusts subscribe to the kind of the basic commitments and principles of what groundwork is about, but we all deliver unique, bespoke activities which fits in with partners, stakeholders out there. We all have our unique kind of projects. I think you just touched upon one of them there about the floating ecosystem. We like to call it the Great Geordie Reef, more locally on there. It's a broad spectrum of activity, and it's not just the activity, but I think it's about the approach that kind of matters. And I think I mentioned before the secret sauce in there. I think what we do is not just focus on one specific area of work and what the outcomes could be achieved. It's about bringing that connectivity between stakeholders and partners, and we're able to bring the added value in there. We're able to work with partners to go, well, how about we bring this partner in, and that enables us to leverage in further funding and create a more, probably an old term now, the holistic kind of package to it all. Another part of what we do, we operate in the places and the kind of thematic areas where others find it difficult. And I think that's probably true of a lot of charities, is where there's been some sort of kind of market failure or an issue that's arose kind of thing. And so I suppose that's not unique to Groundwork, but it's a particular trait that we do hold dear, that if you look at it and go, my God, that's hard, well then that's the place that Groundwork needs to be in there. And I suppose it goes back to where Groundwork originated. It was, back in the early 80s, and it was part of kind of social discontent at the time, and the deindustrialisation, etc. And we were formed in partnership with government and local authorities to try and help, where recognising they couldn't do it alone. We need somebody else on board in here, and that's where we come in to kind of create an alternative, a third way, a new solution to it. I think that going back to the diversity and the breadth of what we do means that we connect lots of quite disparate partners together. So we might be talking to the Environment Agency, the Combined Authorities, the NHS, welfare to work providers connected to Department for Work and Pensions, National Lottery. So bringing lots of different stakeholders' agendas and seeing where they align and how they can come together on this. Mentioned about being a federated group of charities. Yeah. So we're both large, where we can have a lot of that kind of back office structure, support, quality, assurance, etc. But then managed, determined, governed, operating locally in there. So trying to get the best of both worlds in there. Another one I kind of links to not being a relatively well-known charity is that principally we are a doing organisation. Get out there and actually get on the ground and do and demonstrate through practice what we're doing on there. Sometimes we might get it wrong, but invariably I believe we get it right, and I truly believe that we are effective in what we do, and where we can see metrics which compare to others, then it's shown that we're doing a good job. And I think that leads to not wanting to do work that others are doing well, find the gaps, add value again. It's not about displacing what actually is really good work out there with partners on this. God, I could go on and on and thinking about the secret sauces. It's quite a heady mix from my perspective anyway.
But it sounds to me, everything ticks our boxes in the sense that you're local. You don't operate in a silo. You work with others to achieve a common goal. All of this is very, very difficult work and very skillful work, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's enjoyable.
Well, of course, and I think that, as you say, even if you're failing, as long as you learn from your failures, so then you can use that as a stepping stone to get somewhere where you need to be. And it just struck me, Steve. When you were talking, I've looked at your website and I've done a bit of research, and it struck me that you're one of the few organisations out there that directly relates your work or measures its work against the Sustainable Development Goals. You just don't see that anywhere. And so I was thrilled to see that. And your sort of response to my question, what are you? I can see why, because you see that there are different crises and problems, and there's not one approach, and it's working with partners and it's connecting issues together, which I think is a really powerful thing. Are you conscious of the Sustainable Development Goals? I presume you do because it's on your website, but how do you use the Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, I think the Sustainable Development Goals, first of all, like what you said, the alignment is very apparent in what we're doing. The Sustainable Development Goals cover a whole, even wider than Groundwork. That suggests that we're bigger than what we are. But there's many of what's in there that we fully recognise, and I think the Sustainable Development Goals provide a kind of a universal language, a recognisable language. Because I go back to our partners, we often, it is hard because we're having to embrace all the jargon and terminology and systems and language that is really in that kind of particular silo, as it were, and that's quite challenging. So by using the Sustainable Development Goals, to my mind, I think it's a recognisable concept, a brand, idea, something as an umbrella that can be, universally understood across all the different stakeholders, partners that we work with on there. So I think that it gives that, enables communication, and it's recognisable in there.
Oh, absolutely, and it's an international brand that you can identify with, and it seems to me a lot of Groundworks work was doing the Sustainable Development Goals before the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Groundwork, well, we've been in operation over 40 years now, and it's something. I was just at a Federation executive meeting yesterday, and talking again about, rehearsing what are we doing here, why are we here, what's the situation that we're operating in, and it goes back to the founding parts about social discontent, economic challenges. I think more apparent than what was there in the early 80s is the environmental challenge that's coming in here, and so I mentioned before social and environmental. I think really it's the social, economic and environmental, bringing it together in there. So it's revamping it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, as you say, it's always been there, but and each situation will look different, I guess. And that's why it's so interesting to hear that you're a federation, and presumably you make, at the ground level in northeastern Cumbria, you identify the issues that you want to address. Is that right, or is it addressed presumably not from head office, or am I just?
Oh no, the head office provides us the brand. It provides us a connection with national players, with the national government, some of the agendas there to try and make sure that what we're doing in effect aligns from a national perspective, but then we translate that into a local perspective, and things change quite well on a national perspective, change of government, etc., and the priorities there, but locally about devolution. So we actively talk to our the newly formed combined authority for NECA, North East Combined Authority, that's just come into emergence now. So again, what are the challenges that they're facing? How can we have a conversation with them about, well, where are the challenges, the gaps that they're seeing, and therefore how do we fit in with that? We're also there to listen to communities and what's going on. We have like a Youth of Today forum about understanding people's perspective on the challenges ahead. So how can conversations like that both feed into the wider understanding of what's required, but also then how do we respond to actually what's needed out there? It's not just us feeding in. There are thousands of others that are also feeding into that agenda. So we need to recognise it and then help respond and come up with solutions for it.
So that's it's interesting. I mean, it's sort of listening and learning, and I mean, and I was going to ask sort of later on about you also work with Groundwork USA, or there's a sister organisation in the USA, because this has taken the conversation onto another international.
Well, yeah, it's Groundwork is a movement. It originated as a movement, a project, a kind of concept. I kind of got back to that idea about how we operate, and yes, it got picked up and established in USA, and that's a growing movement there. It's really lovely to, if anybody's got time, to have a look at some of the websites over there and some of the fabulous work that's going on. We also, and I'm not sure if it's still there, but Groundwork in Japan. I remember probably about 15 years ago we had a contingent of Japanese people coming over to share, some of the learning from operating in different kind of context, as it were. So yeah, it's not just being very local. It's about looking at a national perspective, but then international in one sense about how can we get best practice and learning from that.
Oh, I think that's terrific. I think that's a fantastic approach, and it seems to me that enabling people to communicate with others is a core part of the work that you do, and I wonder why that is of such importance to you.
I'm trying to think. The example that always comes to my mind is that over the years we've done some great work simply connecting departments in local authorities. It might be just in the next room kind of thing, but often silos, physically or in kind of thematically in a kind of department or whatever, they're focused on their priority, but their priorities could potentially be influenced and achieved through a third party in there. So quite often we would connect even within an organisation, not just between organisations in there. So it's there's many ways of achieving and achieving a kind of win-win-win situation.
Oh, that's a really valuable function, I think. I mean, as you say, not only organisations operate in silos, but within the organisations they operate in silos.
Absolutely.
And it's allowing them to see the bigger picture as well, and how they connect with the issue they're working on, how it connects with others, and how we can learn from that and hopefully improve. Well, what about at the local level in terms of enabling people on the ground in the northeastern Cumbria to communicate with each other? How do you go about that, or do you have examples of how you do that? I mean, Josh's story is an example, isn't it, I suppose? That he was a young lad who was studying marine conservation and volunteered and then got a job.
I think Josh, if I'm right, came through one of the employment programs as well, linked to Kickstart. That was obviously part of the government's endeavour to recover from the pandemic and support young people, and we supported that program. And that, maybe this is going slightly off piste in terms of your question, but it is dear to my heart, about supporting young people have their first step, develop, get the experience, get a career. I think there is a real valuable role, and again, this is going back to the secret sauce of Groundwork, taking people on. It could be lived experience, etc., or giving their first chance in the labour market. They might stay with Groundwork, or they might then move on from Groundwork, and we call it become frogs, friends of Groundwork. I mean, it's subjective.
That's lovely.
Kept from the 1980s, that one, but
nice.
And this is, well, coming back to me, I started 24 years ago as a volunteer.
Did you? Oh.
So as a Millennium volunteer.
Wow.
And so Groundwork provided me that opportunity, and then weaved away a merry way throughout the organisation, doing all sorts of wonderful things. And then I've stayed. I'm one of a number of people who have stayed with Groundwork, but many have moved on and advocates of what Groundwork does.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose it goes back also, as you say, to an ethos, a way of thinking and looking at things, I guess. Does that play a role?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's critical. It's not just what you do, it's how you do it. And in equal measure. It can be quite easy to focus on the tangible what, rather than the slightly more intangible how.
That's interesting. So the process is of real value. It's not just getting to the outcome, it's the process itself. If it's
I think it ultimately leads to a better outcome in there, or supports that.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. That's interesting, and I think that's thinking about organisations that I know that I respect hugely. They're process oriented. They believe that the process has to be of value and has to be rich and listen to different stakeholders, etc. And that, I think that's a really valuable thing. So looking at, perhaps that process, we can talk about some of the processes through looking at your sort of core areas of work. I've got a few here. I may have missed out some, so please jump in if I have. But energy efficiency seems to be one of your core areas of work. Could you perhaps just give us an overview or an example, or whatever best way to describe the work that Groundwork North East in Cumbria does on that issue?
Yeah, energy efficiency. We have a project or a kind of movement called Green Doctors, and this is about providing energy advice and guidance to householders. Previously, before the energy crisis, it was often about switching tariffs, etc., and saving money. But it was also about obviously reducing your energy consumption in the household. Now that area of work is significant more recently because of the challenges we've faced in terms of the cost of energy, and also the development into retrofit, and
So that's adapting existing systems to more energy efficient ways. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's the approach that we have on the energy efficiency. A lot of organisations work in that field and provide telephone support, internet support, and guidance around this. But what we do, I suppose, differently in there is actually go out and visit people in their home. And going over the doorstep and seeing the issue in context, and therefore being more bespoke about the kind of support and solutions, implementing small measures ourselves, from putting the kind of the foil-backed radiators, etc., and the draft excluders, the light bulbs, etc., undertaking some of the small measures, which in a way is a very kind of a basic version of retrofit. Retrofit's often seen as the kind of putting in the new solar panels and heat pumps, etc. But there are some basic measures that can be done to start with, and also about the insulation part of it. But I think the key part there is about being there with the person and supporting them through that, because the most vulnerable people that we're engaging with, that's the approach that's needed, rather than trying to see something on a screen and try to decant that or understand that and translate it and implement something themselves. And also it leads to other kind of support where that person in the household may also benefit from support from an employment programme that we might be operating, or one of our partners are operating. So it provides a kind of a starting point of a triage, as it were, about where potential other support could be provided.
That's excellent. I think that's again, you're looking at linkages and connectivity, and it's really refreshing to hear that. And what I liked also, going back to what you said earlier on, is that you only step in if no one else is doing the work that you know. So I think that's really important, because obviously the third sector sometimes, I don't think justifiably, but sometimes it gets criticised for duplication of work, etc., and obviously that has cost implications, etc., etc. So I think that's a really wise thing. Nature-based solutions is another area, and you sort of hinted, well, not more than hinted at that, but if you could just explain
what it's about,
what you're doing at the moment, maybe in terms of that issue.
Well, you touched upon the first one about the floating ecosystem in there, or the Great Geordie Reef on that. I think it's useful. It's a relatively new term, nature-based solutions, and I suppose it's useful to understand, in effect, what it is. And I would say it's about actions, projects that protect, help sustainably manage and restore natural and modified ecosystems, environments. So it's not just in a purely beautiful natural environment. It could be on I don't know, like the floating ecosystem at the quayside in Newcastle there, it's a modified system there where you've got the concrete walls but how can you utilise that and introduce nature in amongst it. But the outcome is about trying to not just provide environmental benefits, but there are the social and economic benefits that can come from these kind of interventions. Great Geordie Reef. We also do work salt marsh restoration. A lot of work in and around that at the moment. It could be rock pools on harbour walls. Maybe introducing artificial nesting. There's a project being done recently around kittiwakes and trying to support nesting of kittiwakes around this, but also delivering on kind of flood mitigation work, more and peat bog kind of restoration. One of the projects that I'm quite interested at the moment, it's been for a few years now, is wild oysters, which catches the eye, where we've been working to establish a new kind of reef off the northeast coast, and then dropping in hatchlings, as it were. I'm not really sure I've got the right terminology there, but
I don't know what the term is for young oysters. I don't know. Yes,
but establishing wild oyster beds for helping to improve kind of filtration and the quality of water quality, etc. on that, and then the kind of ecosystem which can impact on stocks of fish and the rest of it. So a whole raft of areas, but I think the other part that ground, we work with many partners around this, from the Environment Agency, the national parks and landowners and Nature North, for instance, around this. But what we're also trying to be at the forefront of, and I think we are, is about exploring how do we quantify some of the economic outputs and the biodiversity net gain from the projects that we're doing. We're trying to explore the kind of the financial modelling of these things for future, about making investable propositions, so can we leverage in private sector investment and other stakeholder investment by demonstrating that the outcome, whether it's social, environmental, economic, can then hit their needs, and therefore they've got something that they can invest in and see a return from that. So I think it's a really exciting area where trying to leverage in more funding into this kind of work by generating new models of working.
Yeah, and I think I love the term the Great Geordie Reef. I think that's absolutely superb, because it's intriguing.
Yes.
And I think that, to explain what these sort of floating ecosystems are, exactly that, aren't they? They're on sort of rafts, and you have vegetation and growing out of those rafts. Is that right?
Yeah, above and below, and about how that impacts. And we're doing a lot of research with cameras, etc., to understand what impact does that have on kind of nurseries for fish, etc., below, but also the other part on the Great Geordie Reef. I believe it's the first tidal kind of reef. People have done this before in terms of the rivers, but we've got that river estuary aspect and the tidal aspect. So the ingenuity there is about how it's on these pillars, so it can go up and down with the tide as well on this.
Right.
But it's not a huge reef in there, but it's trying to demonstrate what the art of the possible is. And there are examples now in other parts of the world where the concepts start off, obviously, like many things, as a pilot in small scale, but then how can you scale this if you can demonstrate this, and then how much does that cost, what's the return that you can get from this, and then you can create a whole ecosystem along the kind of quayside potential.
So today we're at Hebburn and Sunderland Sea Cadets on the banks of the Tyne in South Tyneside, and we're here to build the world's first floating ecosystem that's going into a tidal river in the UK. So the floating ecosystem is a 1,000 square foot man-made island. It's designed to float up and down on the Tyne. It's going to be installed at Newcastle Quayside, and it's planted with native wildflowers, so it gives the space for nature in a very urban environment. Groundwork North East Cumbria have been working on this project for over 3 years now. It was originally designed as part of the Tyne Estuary project, which is a partnership project that looks to involve key strategic bodies in improving the Tyne Estuary. So we've been working with the Environment Agency, with Northumbrian Water, with NE1 Limited, so that we can finally install this great solution to some of the problems that we face in our urban rivers. But we're also employing up to 38 young people and giving them the skills and experience to be able to go on and get long-term jobs. It'll be planted with thousands of native wild plants that are adapted to live in this area, so they're specifically picked that they can tolerate the slightly saline conditions that we get in the estuary here. Given time, they'll grow, they'll develop, and they'll obviously blossom. So in the summer months you'll get a beautiful area of native wildflowers that provide a home for pollinators, so for butterflies and bees and other insects. It'll be potentially for nesting areas, so the one that we've installed previously at Royal Quays Marina has had common tern nesting on it, it's had mute swan nesting on it, it's had mallard nesting on it, and that's only been in a year. So we're hoping that we'll get similar things happening down there. But what's also important is that underneath the water, the roots of the plants go down into the water and they kind of form like a little mini reef. So that provides kind of habitat for marine life, so for bivalves and basically seashells or the like to grow, and it provides a shelter for fish as well. So animals moving up and down the river will be able to find some residence there and live and feed and hang out down there.
I think it's great, and I love that art of the possible, and I think that is having, because that's quite central. That's in the centre of Newcastle, isn't it?
Yes.
On the
Yeah.
and so people can come and see that and get inspired, and it must be. If I came across that, I'd want to find out more. So how do people find out more about it, the public? Is there sort of written information there? Or?
Yeah, there's written information there. But,
Yeah.
I would love to assume it's on our website. I'm sure it is. But finding details and just getting in contact and having a conversation about it. This is showing what's there, but then showing to the public out there, but also to organisations, people who want to get involved in supporting either delivery of it or the funding of these kind of things.
Sure. No, absolutely. And another area that you target is employment, and we've talked a little bit about that, but could you add to that in terms of what you're engaged with at the moment in terms of employment?
Yeah, I think two things. We support the government in terms of some of the employability programmes. We deliver a contract over in Cumbria, part of the Restart contract, but about how we can, again, embed that contract in amongst some of the projects that we're delivering, say from Green Community Hubs, for instance, and about how they can add value to not just delivering something in isolation, how do you wrap it up in all the other activity that we're doing, but other parts of employment, working with some of the combined authorities, particularly North East Combined Authority and Tees Valley Combined Authority, on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, where we're supporting economically inactive people, helping to re-engage back into the labour market, for instance, on that. So we're delivering a lot of projects north of the Tyne and down in Tees Valley and in County Durham.
It's interesting. I mean, it's a lot of work that you're engaged with. Is it a lot of it volunteer driven, or is it mainly paid staff driven, or a combination of both?
It's a combination. We employ about 170 people, headcount wise.
In the northeastern Cumbria.
In the northeastern Cumbria, yes. And I say, if we go back to that kind of one of the largest but unknown charities out there, but then also, as I say, wrapped up with teams of volunteers, teams of people who are engaged in, say, the employment programs. One of the ones we are supporting National Citizen Service UK Year of Service, they call it, where it's a 9-month paid placement, a bit like the Kickstart, for which Josh I think was engaged with there.
Yeah.
But so we have kind of support employment programs that can again work both to enhance what Groundworks doing, but also then placing with partners, so again, we can help other organisations as well achieve their objectives.
Yeah, terrific. And I guess my other area that I was going to come onto, or your area that I was going to come onto, is youth, the young people. How do they feature in your work?
Well, particularly around a lot of these kind of youth employment programs, that's been something that's been driving us for the last 4 or 5 years at least. The benefit that we've had as an organisation about finding the right people to support our kind of charitable objectives, employing these people, but then also providing that first stepping stone out into the world of work. There's been a lot of work around that youth employment, but years ago when I first started Groundwork, there was a lot of what I would call the traditional youth work, supporting young people in a youth work capacity that has faced considerable challenges over the last decade. Is death by 1,000 cuts, I would call it, in terms of the overall priority of society as a whole, or at least government, has diminished, as it were. And I think it's coming back now. We're engaging more and more around just working with young people, supporting, advocating, mentoring, support, which can provide a stepping stone into an employment programme, into education, into whatever, help realise their aspirations, their ambitions, etc. But you need to have that initial basis engagement, which isn't the school, which isn't the parents. It's recognising youth work as a really valuable service. We get work with like police and crime commissioners around antisocial behaviour, and helping support this, providing diversionary activities, giving something to do, and so it's I'm glad to see it starting to come back. And I think with what's happened in this summer of discontent, it feels like, where a lot of young people are being led astray and found engaged in something that kind of, maybe a better term than coerced into, but influenced to be involved in. We need to come back and rile against that and find a different way.
I find it interesting that it's sort of come up in a couple of things. I mean, with the first thing that caught my attention was when you talked about the energy efficiency and going to people's homes. And it seemed to me it's building up a relationship, building up trust, and finding out what that person, what other layers of need or whatever, or concern that person has. And for me, I think that must be crucial when you're working with young people, is building trust.
It is, absolutely, because I said there's youth work and employment, and we married the two together when a lot of the youth employment type programs came out, where it was identified by local authorities, etc., where we had a very strong youth worker program, youth work qualifications. We actually delivered a youth worker training program, which created a lot of youth workers that we took on and out there as also. But that basis, we then trained the youth workers in the employment type field, which is information, advice and guidance. But what it created was a team of people that could engage the young people in a setting that's appropriate to the young people, have the relationship, understand the context of that young person and what they're dealing with, deal with some of the things, pre-employability, I think the terminology is, but from sofa surfing or some of the drug and alcohol issues or the housing issues, or what, getting that basis right, so that they can engage with a more structured information, advice and guidance, coaching, where you're kind of pushing the young people forward. I think what often can be seen is that jumping straight into the pushing them doesn't work. You need to have that in the groundwork done, and it goes back to the beginning.
No, it's nice. I mean, and that's the organisation's name is not just there by mistake. It's putting the groundwork in, as you say,
Yeah.
on many different levels. And the next one I was going to talk about was health and well-being, and I think again you've hit on that. And it's not just physical health and well-being; it's mental health and well-being, I imagine.
Yeah, it's and supporting the health and well-being again before potentially engaging with employment. Economic inactivity is intrinsically linked to the health and well-being side of things. We do rafts of kind of programs from men's sheds, to help with their connection and dealing with isolation, loneliness in there.
Can I just ask you to sort of jump in there for our international viewers who are probably thinking, men's sheds, what the hell is he on about? It's actually quite a British thing, I suppose, isn't it? Maybe it's not. Maybe all men are obsessed by sheds and being in their shed. But could you explain a little bit more about what a men's shed approach is?
I think an Englishman's castle is his shed.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Well, it's trying to find an environment where people, men in there, would feel comfortable undertaking activities, sharing experiences, sharing skills and interests. But it's providing that kind of something to do to then evolve the conversations and opportunities thereafter. I often think it's a classic thing to the old kind of clubs and pubs where you'd have the dominoes and the shove halfpenny and all the rest of it, and on there, particularly the men there, quite often just want to have the kind of activity, playing pool or whatever, and the conversations evolve from the activity. But it's trying to provide, the allotments and the sheds. It's about looking at the therapeutic value of being outside and doing the physical work. So it's the physical benefits, the environmental benefits that you can have in there, but from eating fresh produce, and it's using the context of that kind of allotment in the shed to then evolve, support their well-being thereafter. And again, it becomes part of an engagement tool, which then can lead into support where could green doctors support you in your house there, can employment support you, etc.
Nice. I mean, it's all layered into each other, isn't it? I mean, that's why I think you're such a good organisation in terms of relating to the Sustainable Development Goals. Because all the time you're saying, the issues are sort of nested in each other, really. Sorry, you were going to say, Steve.
No, just as well, mentioned some of the direct activity that we do, but we also, say over in West Cumbria, we coordinate a mental health partnership. So channeling the funding in, and then we help support the fabric of providers who are engaged in delivering around mental health. So again, goes back to that idea, it's not a case that we've got the only solution and the best solution and all the rest of it. It's also then about how can we support others to be able to deliver in that field as well.
And it may well be that you say that you're probably the biggest unknown charity, but your approach is not about going out there saying Groundwork's the best and forcing it down people's throats. You do, as you said, I think at the beginning, through action.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily get the sound bites or because your work is quite complicated, I think.
Well, that goes back to the original one, the elevator pitch. And
yes, I can see why you balked at that when I first mentioned it. Yeah,
because even people that I've worked with for many years and with different stakeholders might see us as an employment organisation or an environmental organisation or a youth work organisation, because that's the prism in which they've seen us. And it's always an ongoing challenge to try and go, well, that's one part of what we are also this, and how they can link together. So yeah, decanting it down is very difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the last one area that I think that I saw on the website was green team and land management, which I imagine is related to nature-based solutions. But is there a difference? Or?
Well, yeah, it kind of overlaps. The green teams, we work with housing providers around this and land maintenance and management, but also we use the green teams over the years for opportunities for the employment programme and the young people to get their first experience and understand the nature of work in there. My first paid job within Groundwork was actually managing a group of green teams and about how they link with communities, helping to identify what's needed in their local area, and then the green teams would support and work with the local authorities, the parish councils, etc. So we always had over the years a kind of rolling programme of green teams that ebb and flow, and depending on the kind of partners and stakeholders that we're working with on there. And yeah, the land management, and we have a landscape architect team, which are principally more so involved in the nature-based solutions, but going back to the kind of landscape design and build, where there was a lot of work done over the years around pocket parks, play areas, and landscape kind of partnerships. So it ebbs and flows depending on what the kind of the need is in different localities and areas, really.
Yeah, it's dynamic by its nature. It's responsive to need. Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot that we've covered, Steve. And I suspect there's a lot more to talk about. Is there anything that you want to mention that we haven't covered so far?
You're right. It's an on. What could I mention more than what we've said? I would just say, yeah, this is Groundwork North East Cumbria, but we have, many other groundwork trusts which are equally as diverse and evolving as we are on here, and I think it's really useful if people just scope Groundwork out, see what if there is any synergy with what they're doing. You never know. It goes back to that art of the possible, only by asking. And I suppose what is unique for the North East is, shy bairns getting out.
Sorry, say that again, Steve.
Shy bairns getting out.
Now, for a non-Northeasterner, you're going to have to translate that.
It just means, just ask. You never know. Have a conversation. You never know where it leads.
Nice. That's a phrase I've learned today. And how do people contact you? What's the best way for people to contact you?
Oh, well, there's the internet website on there, and the various social media channels on there. So hopefully all the contact details are up to date on there. Smashing.
And you'd invite people if they feel like they might want to get involved or volunteer. You always got room for volunteers.
Absolutely, the volunteers is how can people support what Groundwork is about, and there's many different ways, from being a trustee, for instance, of a Groundwork trust, being a volunteer, being an organisation that wants to help fund. We have more and more over the last couple of years. We're engaging businesses that are going, we like what you're doing. Can we help support development of that area? For instance, around the biodiversity net gain and the nature-based solutions, it's really exciting. A lot of businesses that are going, can we know we need to do more on that side of things, and we're getting increasingly pushed towards it. But quite often the more forward-thinking businesses are going, let's try and get involved now so we can understand how we can benefit from this and how we can support this wider agenda.
Yeah, no, absolutely. At this stage of our conversations with organisations and people, I normally run through all of the SDGs and see which ones you hit. And I suspect actually there's probably I'm looking at them now. Rather than I think you hit most of them. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. Number 16. Do you see a relevance there in terms of groundwork or?
Peace, justice, and it's about going back to that social ills side of things, and about trying to create harmony in there, and the equality, diversity, and inclusion agenda. The institutions, and about having trust and dependability in there and supporting that. So yes, ticking number 16.
Wonderful. And number 12, I'm not sure about responsible consumption and production.
We do a lot of kind of recycling based kind of projects.
Right.
We project, I think it's one of the longest lasting projects. I think it's been operating about 10, 11 years now that we deliver. So a lot of the education based programs, working with schools around reduce, reuse, recycle, etc. We're in there.
The only one I'm left with now, Steve, that I'm wondering about is the only one. Actually, there's another one. Clean water and sanitation, SDG number 6.
Clean water and sanitation. I suppose the clean water is around the nature-based solutions, and about some of the kind of working with farmers, and about for the runoff from the phosphates, etc., and about improving the water courses that materialise from that.
Right, interesting. Okay, I've got one now to catch you out. 9, SDG 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure.
Industry, innovation and infrastructure. Industry innovation, I think, is about, I go back to that kind of more about the understanding the financial models that I'm getting tenuous here. But trying to get understand the financial models by which industry will be engaging with things like biodiversity net gain and potential carbon offsetting, etc. So, but also we are trying. This is probably a sidestep here, but we are embarking on an ambition to build what we call a greenhouse 2. We have a sustainable eco business park, business centre in County Durham, which we developed about 16, 17 years ago. Trialling new green technologies in the build and operation of that, from wind turbines to ground source heat pumps, etc. And it was quite groundbreaking at the time, and we still operate that now. And it's a trading arm of what we do, and it generates unrestricted income for the charity, which enables us to operate in perpetuity more. So we're looking to build a new one, hopefully with some partners in the east side of County Durham now, but it might be elsewhere. But again, that's about trying to push the boundaries of green technologies, but also provide a potential eco-business park for fledgling green entrepreneurs, technology, supply chain, etc. That's linked to that. So and we try and work with Durham University around some of that and other partners to take that up. So if anybody wants to support us on that endeavour, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely, and it sounds worthwhile. So congratulations, Groundwork. You are a Sustainable Development Goals organisation. You've hit all of them, which is quite astounding, actually, I think. So that's fantastic. Steve, thank you very, very much indeed. It's a nice note to leave on, really, in the sense that I think so far you're the first organisation that has hit every single one of the SDGs. And I encourage people to watch the Groundwork film on SDG Vision, which is Floating Ecosystems Were a Stepping Stone to a New Career. Josh's story. Just put Groundwork into the search bar and you'll find it. And we'll put some links to your organisation below this discussion, this conversation, Steve. But thank you very, very much indeed, and we wish you all the best in the future. We need more Groundwork.
Brilliant. It's been a pleasure.
Lovely. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, sir.
Bye-bye now.
Now, if you enjoyed that, go and have a look at their film and many, many others on sdg.vision.